Hey, what's going on, guys? Great to see you all again as usual. Dre here and welcome back to the channel. All right, so the iPhone 13 Pro, sort of a flagship device, but as the 13 Pro Max actually sits above it, it's not really top of the range. Though when you look at it, aside from the screen size and the battery capacity, the two phones are pretty much near identical. Now, usually with the release of multiple versions of the iPhone, I personally almost always went with the more powerful option, which is usually the Pro Max. But with the release of the 13 Pro lineup, I could confidently choose the 13 Pro without actually spending anything extra or feeling as if I was losing out and having to compromise on Pro features. So now that I've been pretty much using the 13 Pro as my main device, my main smartphone for quite some time, and while I did first impressions of the 13 Pro in one of my videos, I'll link it below, that's actually going to tell you everything you need to know about the features of the phone. But in this video, this is going to be a review, practically sharing my experience of using the 13 Pro over a longer period. So without any further ado, let's get straight to it. Okay, so when you look at the design and the hardware of the 13 Pro, it's really nothing new or revolutionary. It's pretty much the same as the 12 Pro, except for two differences: much larger camera bump and smaller notch. But unless you actually set this phone side by side against last year's device, you would be really hard pressed to spot these differences. Now, the notch on the 13 Pro is said to be 20% smaller than the 12 Pro, but still packs all the same Face ID tech as before. It's simply just been condensed, but while I did appreciate the smaller size on the notch here, it seems to be really all for nothing and a wasted opportunity, in my opinion, for Apple to actually add something a bit useful with the extra space, let's say by adding something like the battery percentage. All right, hey guys, Editor Dre here. Since recording and editing this video, iOS 16 Beta 5 has been launched. And since that launch, we are now finally getting the battery percentage on the iPhone. So yeah, it's all the rave right now. Everyone is talking about iPhones gonna be having the battery percentage now going forward with the official release of iOS 16, of course. So still not a thing as yet, but at least we know for sure going forward in the future with the official release of iOS 16 that we will be getting the battery percentage indicator finally. So thought I would let you guys know that before moving on to the rest of the video. But hey, let's move on and finish the rest of the video, shall we? Either way, I'm not a fan and I'm still advocating for Apple to actually get rid of the notch altogether. And seeing the rumors on the 14 Pro, it definitely seems as if we might be getting an alternative to the notch. I don't know, let's see. Now, the funny thing to me is that while the front camera has shrunk, the back is just ballooning. Now, there are still 3 lenses here, but new larger sensors, which are actually what's responsible for this huge camera module that pretty much takes up more of the phone's rear and protrudes a bit further from it too. That makes it wobble quite a bit on any flat surfaces, but it's a fair trade-off, in my opinion, for actually getting improved camera performance, which I'll actually get to later on in the review. All right, so the build quality. Well, the build quality actually seems to be quite outstanding, and the materials used are actually proving to be durable over time. Even though I use a case on my 13 Pro pretty much 99% of the time, as I find that it helps with not only protecting the device, but also kind of softening those sharp edges of the stainless steel frame for having a more comfortable daily use. Now, I'm actually using one of those Apple silicone cases that doesn't actually add any much bulk, hence keeping it still a bit pocket friendly, which is also gonna be MagSafe compatible. Now, this is where things get really exciting. The display on the 13 Pro is just stunning. Even though it's smaller than that of the 13 Pro Max, coming in at 6.1 inches, it still has all the goodies and is more than sufficient for my personal day-to-day task. Now, it's a Super Retina 120Hz LTPO adaptive refresh rate OLED panel with great color accuracy. It's sharp and bright, colors are rich, viewing angles are great, and it can hit 1000 nits in brightness with a boost of up to 1200 nits for HDR content. Now, outdoor visibility is excellent, even in direct sunlight, and the screen also supports HDR10 and Dolby Vision. And though all of that sounds really fantastic, what really sets the 13 Pro apart from me is the 120Hz ProMotion high refresh rate. Now, to me, the smoothest is really instantly noticeable, especially if you should go back to using a 60Hz screen. But after getting used to any high refresh rate screen, it's gonna be hard to actually go back to a standard 60Hz refresh rate. Now, I was quite curious to see how having a higher refresh rate would, impact on the 13 Pro's battery life, but because it's an adaptive refresh rate, which actually means it's adjusting up and down between 120Hz and 10Hz as needed and when appropriate, it definitely helps the phone in actually saving power when displaying anything that is just static on the screen. Now, since we're talking about the 12 Pro's battery, how actually has the battery been performing over the past months? No, I was a bit skeptical if I'm actually being totally honest, seeing that the 13 Pro's battery capacity coming in at just over 3000 milliamp is actually quite smaller than that of the 13 Pro Max. But to my very pleasant surprise, the battery performance of the 13 Pro has been nothing but incredible. Now, this is by all measures a potential 2-day phone for me personally, and a typical use will still see it as comfortably lasting a full day. Now, I'm sure someone committed could actually drain the battery in a day with, heavy gaming, extensive video capture, and streaming movies or videos could probably do the trick. But most of the 13 Pro's battery longevity actually comes from the very robust standby battery drain. Now, the phone sips battery when idle, and I've actually observed a drop of around 2 to 3% at best overnight. And also, if I could just quickly add, even after months of extensive use, my 13 Pro still actually displays battery health of 100%. So I'm quite convinced that this device will serve me just fine for many years to come. Hey, if you're finding value in this video so far, then go ahead and hit that like button. And while you're at it, please consider subscribing to the channel as well. That would be a massive help, and for you to actually also become a part of this growing community. Okay, let's get straight back to the rest of the video. Now, sadly, the same can't be said when it comes on to charging the 13 Pro. First of all, Apple advertises a 15-watt MagSafe wireless charging and a 20-watt max wired speed for the 13 Pro, which can deliver a 50% charge in around half an hour, which by today's standards is not acceptable. Now, for context, there are high-end flagship Android phones that charges from 0 to 100% in a matter of minutes. I mean, come on, Apple. I know you can definitely do better. Secondly, you will actually have to purchase a charger to be able to match those charging speeds that Apple advertises. And as we all know by now, getting a charger in the box is now a thing of the past. Now, I've been using this Anker USB-C charger that I found on Amazon for around $20 that actually is compatible with the 30 Pro and gets me to that 20-watt charging speed. So yeah, I definitely recommend you picking up one of these little inexpensive charging bricks for your iPhone. This is not sponsored, by the way, just thought I would, share what works for me with you guys. Now, thirdly, and perhaps one of the major reasons why the iPhone 13 Pro isn't capable of giving us really fast charging speeds, and it's this very antiquated Lightning connector. Yeah. All I can say is that I hope Apple decides to switch to USB-C on the 14 Pro, and I really don't see no excuses why they can't, because almost all their devices, all their other products are USB-C, because this Lightning connector Apple, this isn't it. Heck, this doesn't even support high-speed data transfers. In fact, I'm quite sure you'll probably have better luck getting files off the iPhone using AirDrop over connecting it via cable. No, come on, Apple. Get with the time. I know you can do it, but I digress. Now, Apple's iOS software is among the easiest smartphone software platform to learn and one of the most reliable as well. It really doesn't take long to set the phone up, so it works quite quickly and logically. And while it's not, as customizable as Android, at least not yet, you can still make it your own. Now, I haven't personally run into any crash problems or bug issues, so it's pretty much been smooth sailing for me for the most part using the 13 Pro. Now, I'm currently running on the latest iOS 15 update, which is iOS 15.6, and there hasn't been any major changes apart from the usual tweaks and bug fixes, on top of the plethora of features that comes already with iOS 15. But of course, what I'm waiting on is the official release of iOS 16, which promises to be really awesome to have on the 13 Pro. Now, I got the chance to actually test iOS 16, which I have the beta version installed on my 12 Pro Max. So if you actually want to see some of the new features in action, then I'll leave a link to my previous video that I did comparing iOS 15 to iOS 16 down in the description below. Now, ultimately, the general performance of the 13 Pro has pretty much stuck to the also important theme of consistency. Everything from launching apps to scrolling through the interface and heavy multitasking remains as silky smooth as day one. That's definitely thanks to, of course, that very powerful A15 Bionic chip. Even some of the other very basic things the 13 Pro just naturally gets right. Great call quality, Wi-Fi 6 works flawlessly, the dual stereo speakers are loud and sounds really great, awesome haptics, Face ID is still the best biometric solution and works like a charm every time, even with a face mask. All this just culminates to the 13 Pro pretty much being a really good and a solid performing device. Now, it's quite obvious that the 13 Pro's camera package is far from the most packed. You're really not going to get the most feature-packed setup here on the 13 Pro on the market. In fact, the iPhone's cameras are really a far cry from the humongous 108 megapixel sensor and the surprisingly usable 30x zoom that is found from the S22 Ultra. But really appreciating the cameras on the iPhone actually requires looking through a different lens, pun intended. Now, for me personally, I prefer to look at the cameras as a perfectly subjective choice here, meaning what looks good to me might not be the same for you and vice versa. So definitely take a look at some of these various shots that I took with the 13 Pro. And you can definitely let me know what are your thoughts down in the comments. All photos will be just automatic straight from the camera using the different lenses. Alright, so the iPhone 13 Pro pretty much has been a win for me for the most part. It checks pretty much all the right boxes. It's the perfect size, great performance, really good display, very reliable battery life, solid cameras. It looks and feels great. Yeah, I think it's really just overall a perfect balance for my needs. Now, coming from the 12 Pro Max, was it the best choice to get the 13 Pro? Well, yes and no. Even though the 12 Pro Max has been really solid and more than capable, it was just simply too big. But at the time, to really get the best Pro features on an iPhone, you really had to go and get the Pro Max model. But as I said, with the 13 lineup, I was able to get all the great features in a size that was really more pocket friendly. Otherwise, the 13 Pro was really just a few spec bump up from the 12 Pro. Really nothing major. But the 13 Pro is definitely not a perfect device, which I already spoke about some of my gripes of the device. And hope with the 14 Pro, which is actually just a couple months away by now, Apple actually decides to fix some of these issues. So fingers crossed that Apple definitely delivers this time around. Anyways, that's pretty much it for this video. Thanks so much for watching to the end. And if you did in fact found this video helpful and useful, then help others by hitting the like button so the video gets suggested more to other people. Remember to also subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so as yet. That will also be helpful, and for you to also be a part of this amazing community. Thanks again for all the continued support, and I'll definitely see you guys again in my next video. Peace.